Jordan Whitfield was 38 years old, and until that Friday afternoon, his wife believed she had him completely figured out. He drove a 5-year-old Tahoe. He coached youth basketball on Saturdays. His neighbors knew him as a logistics consultant. Quiet, steady, easy to overlook. Brianna had spent 6 years beside this man and decided he simply wasn't enough. So she found someone she thought was more, her boss, Regional VP Dominic Hale, with his leased Mercedes and his tailored suits, and his absolute certainty that he was the most important man in every room he entered. That afternoon, Brianna walked into her husband's home office carrying divorce papers she'd already filed. Dominic standing in the doorway behind her like a prize she was showing off. She had no idea that the quiet man sitting at that desk owned the company where she and Dominic both collected paychecks. And when Jordan opened his desk drawer and placed his CEO credentials flat on the table, the silence that followed lasted only a few seconds. But it changed everything. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The dashboard loaded at 5:47 in the morning. Jordan Whitfield sat at the desk in his converted sunroom, still in the gray t-shirt he slept in, a mug of coffee steaming beside the keyboard. The screen filled with numbers, revenue lines, shipping volume, contract margins, regional breakdowns across 6 states. $40 million of annual business, moving freight through the American Southeast, organized into neat rows that only a handful of people in the world were cleared to see. He read through it in 11 minutes. He didn't take notes. He never needed to. The numbers lived in his head the way addresses lived in a mail carrier's, automatic, mapped, part of the muscle. Then he closed the laptop, opened the news app on his phone instead. That was the transition. Dashboard to headlines, CEO to regular man. He did it every morning like flipping a switch, and the switch was easy because he'd built it to be easy. The discipline wasn't performance. It was just who he was. Outside the kitchen window, the Atlanta suburb was waking up slowly. A neighbor walked a dog down the sidewalk. A sprinkler came on across the street. The sky was that soft gray pink of early morning, the color of a city that hadn't fully committed to the day yet. Jordan got up and made a second cup of coffee. Then he made Brianna's too, set it on the counter the way he always did. Cream, 1 sugar. He'd been doing it for 6 years without being asked. By 8 o'clock, he was dressed in dark jeans and a plain polo. He drove a 2019 Chevy Tahoe with 61,000 miles on it. Dark blue, clean, nothing special. His neighbors on Wexford Lane had formed their own quiet opinions about him over 3 years. Nice enough. Keeps to himself. Does something in logistics, the kind of man you wave at and feel good about waving at, without knowing exactly why. What they knew, he coached youth basketball at the community center on Saturday mornings. He brought food to the block party every summer. He helped the Garcias carry furniture when they moved in. He nodded at people. He remembered their dogs' names. What they didn't know, he had a meeting with a city councilman next Thursday about a $2 million community development partnership. He had a CFO, a legal team, and a chief of staff. He had a company. None of that was their business. That was the point. Brianna came downstairs at 8:22, already put together. Blazer, heels, hair done. She moved through the kitchen with efficiency, the kind that didn't include him. She picked up the coffee he'd made, took 1 sip, set it back down like she'd forgotten about it. "I've got a client call at 9, she said, without looking up from her phone. "Okay." He was leaning against the counter. "I made eggs if you want." "I'll grab something at the office." She picked up her bag. She crossed the kitchen. She kissed him on the cheek, the corner of it, barely landing, and was gone. The front door clicked shut behind her. Jordan stood there for a moment. Then he turned back to the stove and finished his eggs. It wasn't one thing. It was never one thing. It was the phone, screen side down on the coffee table every evening for the past 2 months, like it had always been that way, like he wouldn't notice the change. It was the new perfume, something darker than what she usually wore, something that didn't match the rest of her. It was the gym membership she'd signed up for in January and used maybe 4 times. It was the way she laughed differently on the phone when she walked into the other room to take calls. It was the late nights, client dinner, team happy hour. Stuck on the connector, just leave without me. Small things, each one fine on its own. Together, they made a picture Jordan had not yet allowed himself to name. He noticed. He always noticed. He just didn't react. Reaction without information was only noise. And Jordan Whitfield did not make noise. He was on the road by 9, heading to a site visit, when his phone buzzed through the Tahoe's speakers. Petra. Morning. Petra Okafor's voice was crisp, already several steps into the day. I've got something for you before I send it up the chain. Vendor billing irregularity, flagged by accounts payable yesterday afternoon. It's in the Southeast carrier contracts, specifically the accounts under Hale's region. Jordan merged onto the highway. What kind of irregularity? Invoice amounts that don't match the rate agreements. 3 separate carriers over the last 2 quarters. The gaps aren't huge individually, but they're consistent. Consistent how? Consistent like they were supposed to be. She paused, like someone knew exactly how large to make them. Jordan was quiet for 3 seconds. Pull the full audit trail. Don't loop in anyone else yet. Just you and me. Already started, Petra said. I'll have it to you by end of day. Good. He signaled to change lanes. Quietly, Petra. Always. Brianna's text came at 4:11 that afternoon. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Jordan read it once. He set his phone face up on the kitchen counter. He always left it face up. And started cooking dinner for 1. He ate slowly. He washed the dish. He turned off the kitchen light. Then he sat back down at the table in the dark and did not move for a long time. The receipt was small, white, folded once, barely the size of a business card. It slipped out of Brianna's coat pocket and landed on the laundry room floor without a sound. Jordan almost didn't see it. He was pulling her dry cleaning off the hook to hang in the closet, something he'd done 100 times, because he was that kind of husband, when the paper caught the light. He picked it up, unfolded it. Canopy Restaurant and Bar. Table for 2. March 14th, 8:47 p.m. He read it twice. Then he set it flat on top of the dryer. March 14th was a Thursday. He knew exactly what Brianna had told him about that Thursday. She'd called him at 6 in the evening, voice easy and casual, said the client dinner ran long, said she was heading straight home. She was back by 9:30. He'd been on the couch. She'd kissed him hello, said the food was terrible, laughed a little, said the client talked too much. Table for 2. He looked at the receipt for another moment. Then he folded it back the way he'd found it, tucked it into his own pocket, and finished hanging up the dry cleaning. He did not go find Brianna. She was upstairs. He could hear the television. He went to his home office instead, sat down, and opened his laptop. The shared calendar had been Brianna's idea, 2 years ago. So we stopped double booking ourselves, she'd said. He'd been added to hers, she to his, and neither of them had changed the permissions since. Jordan was fairly certain she'd forgotten he still had access. People forgot small things like that, especially when they stopped thinking of you as someone who paid attention. He went back 90 days. He wasn't looking for drama. He was looking for pattern. And patterns don't lie. They just sit there, repeating themselves, waiting for someone patient enough to count the intervals. He found 4. 4 evenings marked client meeting or team dinner that landed on the same day of the week, Thursday, spaced almost exactly 3 weeks apart, each one running past 9 o'clock, each one followed by Brianna being home before 10. Calm, conversational, completely convincing. He cross-referenced those dates with his own memory. He was good at memory. The dates matched 4 nights he could specifically recall Brianna being lighter than usual when she got home. Not happy, exactly. Lighter. The way people are when they've been somewhere good. He closed the calendar. He stared at the wall. Then he opened his email and searched for the login to their shared cloud storage, the one they used to share receipts and travel confirmations for tax purposes. It took him 6 minutes to find the hotel booking. March 3rd, 3 weeks before the restaurant receipt. A downtown Atlanta hotel, one night, booked through a third-party site in Brianna's email, but charged to a card he didn't recognize. The confirmation said, Guest, B. Whitfield. Her company had sent her to a vendor conference in Savannah that night. He remembered because she'd packed a bag. He'd helped her carry it to the car. The voicemail was the last piece. He wasn't looking for it. He found it by accident on a Thursday afternoon, when he picked up Brianna's phone to move it off the kitchen counter. She'd left it behind on her way out in a hurry, and the screen lit up with a missed call notification. The voicemail banner was already there. Old, undeleted, probably forgotten. He pressed play. A man's voice, deep, comfortable in itself. The voice of someone who never worried about how he sounded. Hey, it's me. Just confirming Thursday. Same place. I'll be there by 7, so don't rush. Actually, rush a little. A low laugh. Then the line went quiet. Jordan set the phone back on the counter exactly where he'd found it, screen side down. He already had what he needed, but a name would make the picture complete. And names had a way of surfacing when you kept still enough. 3 days later, Brianna got a work email on the laptop they sometimes shared. A department-wide update. Mass recipient. Jordan saw the sender name at the top of the thread without trying. D. Hale, Regional VP, Sales. He read it once. He closed the laptop. Dominic Hale. He met Wendell Marsh the following Tuesday at a coffee shop in Midtown. Wendell had known Jordan since they were 14 years old. He'd watched him build a company from scratch and had handled his legal structure since year 2. He was one of maybe 6 people on Earth who knew the full shape of what Jordan had built. Jordan laid it out flat. The receipt, the calendar, the hotel booking, the voicemail, the name. Wendell listened without interrupting. That was one of the things Jordan had always appreciated about him. When Jordan finished, Wendell wrapped both hands around his cup. You're not going to blow up? Not yet. Jordan's voice was even. First, I need to know everything. Wendell nodded slowly. I know someone. I know you do. Jordan had already looked her up. Desiree Knox. He met with Desiree Knox the next morning. She had the kind of stillness that came from years of watching people without being watched back. Calm eyes, a notepad she barely used, a recorder she was upfront about. Former Atlanta PD, 12 years in financial crimes and domestic investigations, precise in a way that immediately told Jordan she would not waste his time or her own. He gave her 2 weeks. He gave her the names, the dates, the company. He gave her one directive. I want the full picture, he said. All of it. She wrote 2 words in her notepad. Understood, she said. He got home at 6:15. He started dinner, chicken, rice, something simple, and had it on the table by the time Brianna walked in at 7. She sat down across from him and talked about her day. A difficult client call, a colleague who frustrated her, a meeting that ran long. The details were elaborate and specific in the way that well-rehearsed stories always were. She made eye contact. She gestured. She laughed once at something small. Jordan listened. He passed her the water. He smiled at the right moments. He said nothing. 2 weeks passed. Jordan moved through them the way he moved through everything difficult. Steadily, without performance. He went to work. He coached basketball on Saturday. He had dinner with his mother on Sunday. He came home each night to a wife who was increasingly somewhere else, even when she was standing right in front of him, and he said nothing, and he waited. Desiree Knox sent progress updates every 4 days. Clean, factual, no editorializing. Jordan read each one at his desk with the door closed, and then filed them in a folder he kept locked in the bottom drawer. The picture was filling in. He didn't like what he was seeing. He kept looking anyway. The call with Apex Meridian's CFO, Raymond Chu, had been on the calendar for 2 weeks. Routine quarterly review, revenue projections, operating margins, the vendor audit that Petra had flagged now entering its formal documentation phase. Raymond was thorough and unhurried, the kind of financial mind Jordan had come to depend on, and they were 20 minutes into a clean, productive conversation when Jordan heard the front door open. He glanced at the clock in the corner of his screen. 2:14 p.m. on a Friday. Brianna wasn't supposed to be home until after 6. He heard footsteps in the entryway, then a second set. "Raymond," Jordan said, his voice unchanged. "Let me call you back in a few minutes. Something just came up." He ended the call. He set his phone face up on the desk. He turned his chair toward the office door and waited. She appeared in the doorway first. Brianna was dressed deliberately. A blazer he recognized, hair done, posture held in the careful way of someone who had practiced this moment in a mirror. She was carrying a manila envelope in both hands, fingers pressed flat against it like she needed to feel its edges to stay steady. She looked composed, prepared, like a woman who had decided exactly what she was going to say and had said it enough times in her head that she believed the saying would be easy. Behind her, filling the doorway of Jordan's own home, stood a man Jordan had never been in the same room with. He didn't need an introduction. He recognized the tailored suit, the lifted chin, the way the man's hands sat loose in his pockets, easy and unhurried, the posture of someone who had decided before arriving that this situation already belonged to him. Dominic Hale looked around the office once, a quick, taking inventory kind of look, and then settled his eyes somewhere slightly above Jordan's head. Brianna stepped forward and set the manila envelope on the desk. "Jordan," her voice was steady, practiced, "I need you to hear me out." He didn't reach for the envelope. He looked at her. "I've been unhappy for a long time," she said. "I don't think you've seen it. Or maybe you did, and we stopped talking about real things a long time ago." She took a slow breath. "I need more than this. More than this." She gestured once, vaguely, at the room, the house, the shape of their life together. "And I've found it." She glanced back over her shoulder at Dominic. It was a brief look, but it carried everything: pride, confirmation, the quiet satisfaction of a woman presenting evidence of a better choice. Dominic's chin lifted a degree higher. Jordan looked at him for a moment. Then he reached forward and picked up the envelope. He opened the clasp. He slid out the first page of the filing and read it. Not skimming, actually reading, moving through the language line by line in the particular way he read every document that mattered. He set it back down. "Dominic Hale," he said. His voice was calm and flat. "Regional VP of Sales." Dominic blinked. Something moved behind his eyes. A small recalibration. "You know who I am?" Jordan looked at him without expression. "I know exactly who you are." He opened the bottom drawer of his desk. He reached in and placed his Apex Meridian credentials flat on the desk surface. Not the consultant's badge, not a vendor pass, not anything Dominic or Brianna would have expected. The CEO's credentials. His name embossed on the card. His authorization level printed clearly beneath it. Then he turned his laptop around. The executive dashboard filled the screen. Jordan's name sat at the top of the authorization chain. Jordan Whitfield, Chief Executive Officer, with the full operational structure branching beneath it. Every department, every reporting line. The signature chain on every major contract the company had executed in the past 18 months. He let them look. The silence was immediate and complete. Brianna's composure came apart slowly, like paper getting wet. Not all at once, but in stages. The edges first, her eyes moving from the screen to the credentials to Jordan's face and finding nothing there to hold on to. Dominic had gone very still. The chin came down. The easy posture in the doorway tightened into something new. Something that understood, suddenly and completely, what 18 months of skimmed vendor contracts looked like from where he was now standing. Jordan picked up his phone. He dialed Petra. "Monday morning," he said. "Boardroom. Lupin Legal and HR." He ended the call. He looked at Dominic. "You work for me." Then he looked at Brianna. His voice didn't change. It didn't need to. "My attorney will contact yours." He stood up. He picked up his keys from the corner of the desk. He walked past both of them, through his own hallway, and out the front door. He didn't look back. The drive to Wendell's took 32 minutes. Jordan didn't go home first. There was nothing at the house he needed. Brianna had a key. So did he. But the idea of walking back through that door, past the entryway where she had stood with another man, past his own desk where he had turned the laptop screen around, felt like a thing he wasn't ready to do tonight. Maybe not this week. He drove the way he always drove. Hands at 10 and 2. Speed limit. Radio off. Wendell lived in Cascade Heights, in a brick colonial with a wide front porch and interior lights that were always on late. He was that kind of man. The kind who kept his study lamp burning past 10 o'clock because there was always something left to read. When Jordan called from the car, Wendell picked up on the second ring and said only, "I'll put on coffee." And that was the entire conversation. The study smelled like old books and wood oil. A pair of reading glasses sat on top of a legal pad on the desk. Wendell's bookshelves ran floor to ceiling on 2 walls, titles Jordan had absorbed over 20 years of friendship, though tonight he couldn't have told you a single one. Wendell poured 2 cups and set them down without asking how Jordan took his. He'd known that for 30 years. Jordan sat across from the desk. He had Desiree Knox's completed report in his hands. She'd sent the final file at 6:47 that evening, flagged urgent, time-stamped with a brief message, full findings attached. "Call when you're ready." He'd printed it at a FedEx on the way over. He set it on the desk between them. "Walk me through it," Wendell said. 22 months, Jordan said. Wendell was quiet for a beat. She said, "She implied recent. Vague. I found it." Like it happened gradually. Jordan's jaw moved once. Knox has hotel receipts going back 22 months. Text message records. A travel pattern. He tapped the top page. It started 4 months after she took the position at Apex Meridian. Wendell leaned forward and pulled the report toward him. He read without rushing. Jordan watched the window. The neighborhood outside was quiet. Someone's porch light blinked on across the street, then off. A car passed slowly. "There's more," Jordan said. Wendell turned a page. 8 months ago. Jordan picked up his coffee, held it without drinking. "She liquidated the joint investment account I set up in 2021. $30,000. Moved it to a personal account, her name only. I didn't know it existed until Knox traced the wire transfer." Wendell looked up. "She also moved $14,000 through renovation billing," Jordan continued. "The contractor last spring, the one who redid the kitchen. Inflated invoices, the difference redirected to the same account." He set the cup down. "I paid every invoice without question, because I trusted her." Wendell set the report down flat on the desk and sat back in his chair. He looked at Jordan the way a doctor looks at a patient whose results have come back worse than expected. Not with pity, but with the careful attention of someone deciding how much weight the other man can carry. Jordan was carrying it fine. That was clear. But the weight was there. It showed in the way he was holding himself. Very still, very straight. The particular stillness of a man who has decided that moving carelessly right now would cost him something. "She wasn't falling out of love," Jordan said. "Not to Wendell specifically. Just out loud. She was building a runway, using my money to buy herself a way out. The whole time, the renovation, the anniversary trip last spring, all of it, she was planning. He stopped, exhaled through his nose. I thought the trip brought us back together. Wendell didn't say anything. Sometimes the most useful thing a person could offer was silence, and Wendell had learned that years ago. Jordan looked at the report. He looked at it for a long moment, long enough that the only sounds in the room were the hum of the refrigerator down the hall and the faint tick of the clock above the bookshelf. "Freeze everything," he said finally. His voice was level. "Joint accounts, joint assets, everything we hold together. I want it locked before Monday morning. She'll find out through counsel." "Already drafted the motion," Wendell said. "I can file first thing." "File it." Jordan reached forward and squared the report against the desk's edge, a small, precise gesture. "And pull everything Georgia marital misconduct law gives us. The financial transfers, the documented timeline. I want it all in front of us before we sit across from her attorney." "We'll have it." Jordan nodded once. He reached for his coffee and drank it this time. He checked into a hotel at 10:30. A Marriott near the highway. Clean, anonymous. The kind of place where no one looked twice at a man arriving with one overnight bag and no explanation. He didn't do it because he was falling apart. He did it because he thought better in spaces that didn't have history in them. The week ahead would require the clearest thinking he had ever done, and he was not going to spend Sunday night in a house full of the wrong kind of noise. He set his bag down. He opened his laptop. He started the week. Jordan pulled into the Apex Meridian parking lot at 7:14 Monday morning. He drove his 5-year-old Tahoe. He parked in the CEO spot. No sign, no nameplate, just a number stenciled in faded yellow paint near the stairwell entrance. He had always preferred it that way. He took the stairs. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, word had already moved through the building, the way word always moves through a building when something has shifted. Not through announcements, not through email, through the small, invisible signals people read without knowing they're reading them. The way the receptionist straightened when she saw him, the way 2 managers near the copy room stopped mid-sentence and found somewhere else to be. Jordan had not been in the building in 3 weeks. That was not unusual. His presence was never guaranteed, and his team was built to run without constant supervision. But there was something different today, and the people who worked for him felt it, the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Nothing visible, just a knowing. He went straight to the executive conference room on the 4th floor. Petra was already there. She had the binders ready, 4 of them, identical, stacked in a neat row at the center of the long table. She had also arranged coffee, a legal pad at each seat, and the projection system already loaded and waiting. When Jordan walked in, she looked at him for exactly 1 second longer than usual. "Everyone's on their way up," she said. "Good," Jordan said. He set his bag down, took off his jacket, and hung it over the back of his chair. He did not sit yet. Petra studied him the way she sometimes did. Not intrusively, just with the practiced attention of someone who has worked beside a person long enough to read weather in them. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm focused," he said. Which was true, and which was his way of answering, and not answering at the same time. She nodded once and didn't push. That was why he trusted her. The executive team filed in over the following 10 minutes. Jordan's CFO, his VP of Operations, his general counsel, and 2 outside attorneys from the firm Wendell had referred, both specialists in corporate fraud and financial recovery. Nobody asked why outside counsel was present. Nobody asked about the binders. They sat down, poured coffee, and waited. Jordan stood at the head of the table. "I'll keep this tight," he said. "Petra, take us in." Petra clicked the first slide. A vendor account summary appeared on the screen. Carrier contracts, billing dates, contract values flagged in red, alongside the approved market rate ranges in gray. The numbers told the story before anyone said a word. Over the past 18 months, Jordan said, moving through the slides at a measured pace, our freight billing in the Southeast region has been running an average of 22% above market rate across 4 carrier accounts. All 4 accounts fall under one sales region. He clicked forward. All 4 are connected to a carrier company registered in Gwinnett County. That company is owned by Marcus Hale. He paused. Dominic Hale's cousin. The room was very quiet. The total overbilling across the period is $340,000. He advanced the slide. A second number appeared beneath it. Forensic Accounting's preliminary review estimates approximately $80,000 was directed back to Dominic personally, through a series of payments made to a consulting LLC registered in his wife's name. No one spoke. Jordan didn't need them to. I am not here to discuss whether this happened, he said. The documentation is in your binders. What I am here to do is tell you what comes next. He looked around the table once, steady, deliberate, landing briefly on each face. Dominic Hale is suspended effective today, with pay, pending a full forensic accounting review. That review will be conducted by outside auditors. Depending on their findings, this matter will be referred to law enforcement. He looked at his general counsel. Marcus, HR will handle notification this morning. Professionally. By the book. Marcus nodded. I want the forensic team in this building by Wednesday, Jordan continued. I want complete access granted to every system, every account, every contract in that region going back 24 months. He picked up his coffee. Any questions? There were none. Not because people had nothing to ask, but because the presentation had been so complete, so precise, that there was simply nothing left to question. Jordan had not left a gap. HR reached Brianna before lunch. A woman she had worked beside for 2 years knocked on her office door, closed it behind her, and delivered the notification with professionalism and no elaboration. Standard administrative review. Her role on accounts within Dominic Hale's sales region, the now disclosed personal relationship, an irresolvable conflict of interest that required review under company policy. Brianna would be placed on paid administrative leave, pending the conclusion of the investigation. She was asked to surrender her keycard and laptop before leaving the building. Brianna called Jordan's cell at 1:17 that afternoon. He was in a call with his CFO. He let it go to voicemail. She called again at 1:43, at 2:08, at 2:51. The calls came in clusters after that, sometimes 10 minutes apart, sometimes less. By Thursday evening, his phone had logged 17 missed calls from her contact. He had not listened to a single voicemail. He had a company to run. Jordan pulled up to his mother's house at 6:30. It was a small brick ranch in Decatur. The same house he'd grown up in. The same crepe myrtle in the front yard that bloomed pink every June and dropped its petals all over the driveway by July. The porch light was already on. It was always on when he was coming. He sat in the Tahoe for a moment before going in. Not because he wasn't ready. Just because there was something about this house, the smell of it, the weight of it, that always asked him to slow down before it let him through the door. He went inside. Cecile Whitfield was 71 years old and moved through her kitchen like she owned the laws of physics. Cornbread in the oven, collard greens on the back burner, a pot roast that had been going since noon, filling the whole house with something warm and low and certain. She hugged him at the door, a real hug, both arms, the kind that didn't ask how you were doing, because it already knew. She looked at his face when she pulled back. She held his gaze for just a moment longer than usual. "Sit down," she said. "Food's almost ready." He sat at the kitchen table, the same table he'd done homework at, the same table where she'd told him his father was working doubles again, and they'd be fine. The wood was worn smooth at the edges. He put his hands flat on it. They ate without rushing. She asked about the company. He gave her real answers. not the short version he gave people who wouldn't understand the long one. She listened the way she always had, fully, without interrupting, the way 30 years of teaching had made second nature. It was only after she cleared the plates that she sat back down and folded her hands on the table in front of her. Jordan looked at her. He knew that posture. It was the posture of something she had been carrying for a while. "I need to tell you something," Cecile said, "and I need you to hear me out before you say anything." "All right," he said. She took a breath. "About 8 months ago, Tanya called me." The name landed quietly. Brianna's maid of honor. A woman Jordan had always liked. Steady, plain-spoken, not given to drama. She'd seen them, Cecile said. Brianna and that man. At a restaurant in Buckhead. Holding hands across the table. She paused. She said there was no question about what she was looking at. Jordan was very still. "She didn't know whether to come to you directly?" Cecile continued, her voice level but careful. "So she called me. She asked me what she should do." Cecile looked down at her own hands, and I told her I needed to think about it. She was quiet for a moment. I convinced myself that one witness, one sighting, that it wasn't enough to bring to you. That if I was wrong, if there was some other explanation. She stopped, started again. "I didn't want to be the one who broke your marriage on something I couldn't be certain of." She looked up at him then. Her eyes were clear, but the weight behind them was real. "I was wrong to say nothing. I have known that every day since." Jordan didn't speak right away. He looked at his mother, at the woman who had raised him alone, who had stretched a teacher's salary and never once made him feel the strain of it, who had always, in every matter that counted, chosen truth over comfort. She was choosing it now, even when it cost her something. "I'm not angry at you," he said. "Jordan, I mean it." His voice was quiet and steady. "You were trying to protect me. I understand that." He let a beat pass. "But I need to talk to Tanya." Cecile nodded. "She called me again last week. She's been carrying this. She wants to talk to you. Can you reach her tonight?" "Yes," Cecile said. "I can do that." They met the following afternoon at a coffee shop in Avondale Estates. Neutral ground, nothing Brianna had ever been to. Tanya was already there when Jordan arrived, seated at a corner table with both hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She was a compact woman in her late 30s, natural hair, good posture, the look of someone who had rehearsed what they were going to say and was now uncertain whether any of it would come out right. Jordan sat down across from her. "Thank you for coming," he said. Tanya looked at him directly. "I should have come a lot sooner than this." "You're here now," he said. "That's what matters." She exhaled slowly. Then she reached into her bag and placed her phone on the table between them. On the screen was a text conversation, a thread between her and Brianna, dated and time-stamped, stretching back further than Jordan had expected. "I kept them," Tanya said. "I told myself it was just in case. I didn't know in case of what." She pushed the phone closer to him. "Scroll up." He did. The messages started 26 months ago. 2 months into the anniversary trip Jordan had planned and paid for himself. 4 days in Savannah, the inn on the river. The dinner reservation he'd made 6 weeks in advance. The trip Brianna had smiled through. The trip he had believed, genuinely believed, had brought them back to each other. The messages told a different story entirely. He read, without expression. He scrolled slowly, reading every line, every date, making sure he understood the full shape of what he was looking at. When he reached the end, he set the phone down and looked up. Tanya was watching him with something close to pain. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "You don't need to apologize," Jordan said. He meant it. His voice held no edge, no coldness, just a clean, quiet sincerity. "You were in an impossible position. You made a hard call, and you saved the proof anyway." He looked at her steadily. "That took something." She blinked, nodded once. I'm going to need a copy of everything in that thread, he said. Screenshots, the original files, whatever your phone can export. My attorney will tell you exactly what format works best. He paused. Is that something you're willing to provide? Yes, she said without hesitation. Whatever you need. Thank you, Tanya. He held her gaze for a moment. I mean that. He sat in the Tahoe in the parking lot for a long time after she left. The afternoon light was going flat and gold through the windshield. He didn't move. Then he picked up his phone and dialed. Wendell answered on the second ring. Add everything to the file, Jordan said. The conference room on the 14th floor of Wendell's building had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Midtown Atlanta. On a clear morning like this one, you could see all the way to the skyline. The glass towers catching the light, the city going about its business, indifferent and enormous. Jordan arrived at 8:50. The meeting was at 9. He set his coffee on the table, hung his jacket on the back of his chair, and sat down. He was wearing a charcoal suit. Nothing loud, nothing that performed. Wendell sat to his left, already reviewing notes. To Wendell's left sat Carol Dunning, a compact woman in her early 50s, with reading glasses on a chain, and a reputation in Atlanta legal circles for recovering assets from people who had spent months believing they were untouchable. She had a legal pad and 3 tabbed folders, and the energy of someone who had done this exact thing before and found it straightforward. At 9:03, Brianna walked in. She looked good. She had clearly thought about that. Her outfit was deliberate, professional, put together, the specific kind of polished that said, I am not falling apart. Her attorney, Gerald Spence, walked beside her, a trim man in his mid-50s with silver at his temples and a practiced expression of measured confidence. Brianna's eyes moved to Jordan when she entered. His stayed on the table in front of him for a half-second longer before he looked up, unhurried, completely calm. He gave her nothing, not coldness, not warmth, just presence. She sat down across from him. Gerald Spence opened. His tone was professional and smooth. Jordan had to admit the man knew his job. He framed Brianna's position carefully. A 6-year marriage, contributions to the household, emotional labor, career development made possible through a stable home. He mentioned the house. He mentioned personal property. He built a picture of a woman who had simply, quietly grown apart from her husband and deserved an equitable resolution. Jordan listened without interruption. Wendell listened without expression. When Spence finished, Wendell said, Thank you, Gerald. He picked up the binder in front of him and opened it. We have some materials we'd like to walk through. Carol Dunning slid a copy across the table to Spence. A second copy went in front of Brianna. Neither of them reached for it immediately. The affair began 26 months ago, Wendell said. His voice was even, factual. Not recently. Not after a period of documented unhappiness. 26 months ago. He turned to the first tab. We have hotel records across 14 separate dates. We have a private investigative report with corroborating documentation. And we have a text archive from a third-party witness, Brianna's own maid of honor, that establishes both the timeline and the nature of the relationship. Brianna's hand moved to the edge of the binder. She didn't open it. Spence's expression hadn't changed, but something behind it had shifted. A slight recalibration, visible only if you were looking for it. Carol Dunning turned to the second tab. Regarding the joint investment account established by Mr. Whitfield, $30,000 contributed entirely by him. This account was liquidated 8 months ago. The funds were transferred to a personal account in Mrs. Whitfield's name alone, without Mr. Whitfield's knowledge or consent. She moved to the third tab. An additional $14,000 was redirected through renovation billing into the same account over a 4-month period. She set her pen down. We are treating both transfers as fraudulent dissipation of marital assets under Georgia law. The room was quiet. Gerald Spence began to speak. Jordan looked at Brianna and spoke first. I want to say something directly to you." His voice was quiet, steady. "Not through attorneys." Spence paused. Brianna looked at Jordan. "You didn't leave because you were unhappy," Jordan said. "You might have told yourself that. You might still believe it. But the timeline doesn't support it." He kept his eyes on hers. "You made a decision 26 months ago. And while you were making that decision, I was funding a home renovation, planning an anniversary trip, and putting money into an account I thought we were building together." He didn't blink. "You used what I gave you to build a way out, and you let me believe in something that was already over." Brianna's jaw was tight. She said nothing. "I'm not saying this because I'm angry," Jordan continued. "I'm saying it because it's true. And because I think some part of you has been counting on me being too hurt to be precise." He sat back slightly. "I'm precise." Wendell nodded to Carol. She opened the 4th tab and slid a new document across the table. It was a single page, clean, a summary figure at the top. It was the full Apex Meridian Company valuation, audited, certified, current. Below it, Jordan's personal asset portfolio, real estate holdings, investment accounts, equity positions. The number at the top of the page was not what Brianna had prepared for. Not even close. Spence looked at the page. He was quiet for several seconds. Then he looked at his client. Brianna was still looking at the number. She had spent 6 years beside this man. She had decided he was small. She had decided he was a ceiling. She had built a careful, calculated plan around that decision. And now that plan was a document on a table. And the document told a story she had never once thought to ask about. Her composure, which had been engineered and maintained and carried all the way through the door, came apart in a way that wasn't dramatic. It was quieter than that. It was the look of a person doing math and not liking the answer. "We'll need a few minutes," Spence said. "Take 5, Jordan said. He pushed back his chair, stood, and walked to the credenza against the wall where the coffee was set up. He poured a cup. He looked out the window at the city. Behind him, he heard the door close. When they came back in, Gerald Spence sat down with the look of a man who had spent 5 minutes delivering information his client did not want to receive. Brianna sat beside him. She was looking at the center of the table. Spence folded his hands. "My client," he said carefully, "would like to understand what's being offered." Jordan sat back down. He nodded to Wendell. Wendell opened the final tab. The Thursday morning sky over Atlanta was the kind of pale, washed-out blue that made everything look clean. The air was cool. The kind of morning that felt like a fresh start. Dominic Hale pulled into the Apex Meridian parking lot at 8:17. He was driving the leased Mercedes, black, freshly detailed, the kind of car that said something about a man before he ever opened his mouth. He had the seat adjusted just right, and a travel mug of coffee in the cup holder, and a podcast on low about leadership and personal excellence. He looked good. He knew he looked good. He had worn the gray suit, the one with the subtle pinstripe that his tailor in Buckhead had fitted for him 18 months ago. His shoes were polished. His watch, a Breitling he'd financed over 24 months and had never once admitted to, caught the morning light as he reached for his bag in the passenger seat. He had spent 3 weeks telling himself the same thing. It's slowing down. The administrative review, the forensic accountants, the suspension with pay. He had called it correctly, he believed. These things ran their course. Companies didn't want the exposure. Legal teams got cautious. Internal investigations got quietly folded into corrective policy memos and process improvements, and everyone moved on. He had told himself this convincingly enough that he had started to almost believe it. He believed it because the alternative required a kind of self-examination he had never learned to do. He stepped out of the car. 2 men were standing on the pavement 12 feet from the building's front entrance. One was black, mid-40s, compact, and still in the way that suggested patience was a professional skill. The other was white, a little younger, with a lanyard around his neck and a brown envelope tucked under one arm. Neither of them was an Apex Meridian employee. Dominic registered that fact somewhere below his confidence, in the part of his brain he didn't listen to. The compact one stepped forward. "Dominic Hale?" Dominic stopped. "Yeah." "Detective Aaron Webb, Atlanta PD Financial Crimes Unit." He held up his badge. "I need you to set your bag down, sir." Dominic looked at the badge. He looked at the detective's face. He looked at the building entrance, 20 feet away, as if he might walk toward it, and this moment would not follow him. "This is about the internal review," Dominic said. "My attorney has already been in contact with—" "Sir." The detective's voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. "Set your bag down, please." The second detective moved to Dominic's right. Dominic set his bag down. His hands were not entirely steady when he did it. "Dominic Hale, you are under arrest for fraud and theft by deception." Detective Webb moved behind him. Forensic review of vendor contract records at Apex Meridian Logistics established a pattern of fraudulent billing totaling $340,000 over 18 months. "You have the right to remain silent." He kept talking. The words moved through Dominic in a way that didn't fully land. Each one technically received, and none of them absorbed, because his mind was still back in the parking lot moment before this one, in the version of this morning where he walked through the building entrance and nobody stopped him. The handcuffs were cold. 4 people were walking across the parking lot behind him. He knew one of them. Kristen, from Regional Operations, who had attended his last quarterly review and laughed at his joke about airline delays. She stopped walking. Then she kept walking, but slower. Her face was careful and blank the way faces get when a person is trying not to look like they're looking. The other 3 were people he recognized from the building, people who took the elevator with him, people who had nodded at him in the hallway and listened to him talk and absorbed the performance of a man who had spent 20 years making sure everyone in his orbit understood that he mattered. They were all looking now. Dominic Hale stood in the parking lot of the company he had stolen from, in the gray suit with the subtle pinstripe, with his hands cuffed behind him, and watched the 4 of them walk past like a slow and quiet verdict. The Atlanta Business Chronicle ran the story 41 hours later. The headline was clean and direct. Apex Meridian VP arrested on fraud charges, following internal investigation. Below it, 3 paragraphs. His name, the company name, the figure. $340,000 in fraudulent vendor contracts over 18 months. A quote from a company spokesperson confirming the charges and noting that Apex Meridian had cooperated fully with law enforcement. No photograph. It didn't need one. Brianna read it on her phone. She was sitting at the small table in her apartment, a rental in a complex she would not have looked at twice 2 months ago. The table was just big enough for 2, though she was always alone at it now. Her coffee was in her hand, and then, at some point, it wasn't, because she had set it down without noticing, and it was going cold beside her elbow. She read the article twice. She read his name in print. She read the number. Outside her window, the city kept moving. Wendell's phone rang on a Tuesday morning. He was at his desk with a cup of coffee and a stack of motions when the call came through. He looked at the number, recognized it, and picked up on the second ring. "Marcus!" Wendell kept his voice even. Marcus Gill, Brianna's attorney, was professional. Whatever personal feelings he carried about the position his client had put him in, none of it came through the line. That was a good attorney. Wendell respected it. "We're accepting the terms," Marcus said. "Full and final. All of them." A short pause. "All of them." The call lasted 4 minutes. Wendell made 2 notes on a legal pad, thanked Marcus, and hung up. Then he called Jordan. Jordan picked up on the first ring. "It's done," Wendell said. There was a brief silence on the other end. Not the silence of a man who was surprised. The silence of a man who had been waiting for a door to close and was simply listening to the sound of it. "Okay," Jordan said. Walk me through the timeline. The terms were what Jordan's team had prepared, and Brianna's attorney had privately known from the moment he reviewed the full asset disclosure, were the only terms that made mathematical sense. The house was not a point of negotiation. It had been purchased solely in Jordan's name. His credit, his down payment, his mortgage. Brianna's name was never on the deed. Her attorney had floated the argument that 6 years of shared habitation created an equitable interest. Jordan's team had responded with the deed, the purchase agreement, and 11 pages of Georgia case law. Marcus Gill had not raised the argument a second time. The vehicle was the same. Jordan's name, Jordan's payments, not a negotiation. The joint investment account, the $30,000 Brianna had quietly drained 8 months ago, was under active recovery proceedings. The $14,000 moved through the renovation billing sat in a separate filing. Together, those funds were subject to civil recovery as fraudulent marital transfers. Brianna's settlement reflected that. What she received was this: her personal property, boxed and scheduled for delivery. A cash settlement that her attorney had negotiated from Jordan's team with genuine effort and real skill. Fair by legal standard, clean, nothing to contest. And severance from Apex Meridian, processed separately by HR under the terms Jordan had personally directed. Against the life she had imagined, against the number she had seen on that laptop screen in Jordan's home office, it was a chasm. She signed on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus Gill told Jordan's team it was the quietest signing he'd had in years. Brianna didn't cry. She didn't say anything at all. She simply picked up the pen and wrote her name and set the pen down and looked out the window of his office at the parking lot below. Marcus told Wendell this later, not out of cruelty, but because attorneys sometimes tell each other these things. In the way of people who have watched too many people arrive at tables, they set themselves. HR sent the letter on Thursday. It was written carefully. The kind of language that was precise without being punishing. Brianna's role on accounts within Dominic Hale's sales region, combined with the now fully documented personal relationship, created a conflict of interest that the company could not reasonably maintain going forward. No finding of direct involvement in the vendor scheme. No allegation of wrongdoing. A clean professional separation with full severance calculated according to her years of service. Jordan had been specific with HR. No theater. No public notice. Nothing that looks like punishment. He had built the company on a certain set of values, and those values did not disappear because the situation was personal. He wanted it done right. He wanted it done cleanly. She left the building on a Friday afternoon with a box of her things and a severance agreement in her bag. The same building she had walked into 5 years ago believing she'd found her footing. The same company she had told people she'd landed entirely on her own merits. The referral from Jordan, an irrelevant footnote she preferred not to mention. She had worked there for 5 years and never once thought to ask who actually owned it. Dominic Hale entered a no-contest plea 6 weeks later. His attorney had spent considerable time and effort trying to construct an alternative, but the forensic accounting report was 47 pages and left no room. 3 years probation. A financial judgment of $340,000 that would follow him through garnishments and credit reports and professional background checks for the better part of a decade. No prison time, which his attorney considered a win. Dominic, standing in the courtroom in a suit that was no longer freshly tailored, did not look like a man who had won anything. Jordan drove to Wendell's office on a Thursday morning 3 weeks after Brianna's signing. The final decree was on Wendell's desk, already reviewed, already correct. Jordan sat down, read through it one final time. Not from anxiety, but from the discipline of a man who always verified before he signed, and then picked up the pen. His signature was steady and even. He capped the pen and set it on the desk. He exhaled slowly through his nose, a long, quiet breath, the sound of something finished. 6 months later, Jordan sat on the porch of his craftsman home with a mug of coffee and nowhere to be for another hour. The house was on a tree-lined street in Kirkwood. Old oaks, sidewalks with cracks in them from roots growing underneath. Neighbors who waved in the mornings and didn't ask too many questions. He had walked through it once with a real estate agent and known in the first 5 minutes. Not because it was impressive, because it felt like a place where a person could actually breathe. He bought it 2 months after signing the decree. The porch faced east. Morning light came through the oak branches in pieces. He sat in a wooden chair he'd found at an estate sale, drank his coffee black, and watched a man 2 houses down load his kids into a minivan. No calls yet. No dashboard open. Just the street waking up and the coffee getting cooler in his hands. He sat there most mornings now, and it still surprised him a little. How good quiet could feel when it wasn't hiding anything. The acquisition closed on a Wednesday in late October. Apex Meridian had been in talks with a regional competitor, a mid-sized carrier out of Birmingham, for the better part of 4 months. The deal added 3 new markets, a fleet of 42 trucks, and a logistics infrastructure that would take Petra's team the better part of a year to fully integrate. It was the largest expansion in the company's history. Jordan marked it the way he marked most things, with precision during the work and with real presence afterward. The celebration dinner was at a restaurant in Inman Park. A private room, a long table, 8 people. His core executive team, outside counsel, Petra. No speeches prepared, no PowerPoint deck. Just a good meal and people who had earned the moment together. Petra stood up somewhere between the entrees and the dessert and raised her glass. To 12 years of watching Jordan make every single one of us look smarter than we actually are, she said. And to the next 12. The table laughed. Jordan shook his head and laughed with them. A real laugh, the kind that comes up from somewhere low in the chest without asking permission. He had forgotten for a while how that felt. He made a toast of his own, short. He thanked the people in the room by name. He meant every word. Saturday mornings were basketball. The same church gymnasium he'd been using for 3 years. The same group of 11 and 12-year-olds who argued about everything and worked hard when it mattered. He ran drills until they complained and then ran them again. He drove there in the Tahoe with a bag of equipment and a travel mug and came home 2 hours later, tired in the good way. Sunday afternoons were Cecile. His mother brought food she had already cooked at her own house and acted as though she hadn't, insisting she'd just thrown it together. He set the table. She talked about her garden, her neighbors, the book she was reading. They ate together on the back porch when the weather allowed. She had told him once, quietly, after one of those Sundays, that she liked what his face looked like now. He hadn't asked her to explain. He already understood. Petra had been angling for the setup for months. She mentioned Amara 3 separate times in the span of 6 weeks, each time casual, each time deliberate, each time reading Jordan's non-reaction as a green light she was simply waiting to use. He finally said yes on a Thursday afternoon, mostly to get her to stop mentioning it. He did not expect much. Amara was a structural engineer. She arrived at the restaurant on time in a blazer that looked like she'd worn it from the office, which she had. She shook his hand and sat down and said, without preamble, "Petra told me you're in logistics. Does that mean you actually understand supply chain, or do you just say the words?" Jordan looked at her for a moment. "Both," he said. She smiled. It was not a performed smile. They talked about Atlanta's infrastructure problems for 40 minutes, before either of them looked at the menu. She had opinions about the city's highway system that were detailed and sharp and correct. He told her about a distribution routing problem his team had solved the previous spring, and she asked a follow-up question that was better than anything his own engineers had asked at the time. They ordered food somewhere in the middle of a conversation about bridge load ratings. and whether the city's growth would outpace its planning capacity inside of 15 years. The date ran 3 hours. He walked her to her car. She said she had a good time in a way that suggested she was surprised by the degree of it. He said the same. He meant it. He drove home on the highway with the windows down and didn't think about very much at all. He thought about Brianna sometimes, less than he expected, and differently than he would have predicted in the early weeks. Not with anger. That had burned clean a long time ago, leaving something quieter behind. Something that felt almost like clarity. She had shown him who she was before the fullest years of his life were spent on it. That was the truth of it. He was 38. The company was bigger than it had ever been. The house was real, and it was his, and it didn't require managing anyone else's perception of it. Monday morning, Jordan drove to Apex Meridian in his 5-year-old Tahoe. He pulled into the CEO's spot. No nameplate, no sign, just a space near the door that everyone on staff understood without being told. He cut the engine, grabbed his bag off the passenger seat. He took the stairs. He started the week. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.